You held your breath like it meant to. Something fragile, something smooth. You lean into the moment, sway, speaking slow but meaning more. Every glance was half a phrase, a quiet note I'd heard before. You shaped your thoughts in open space, soft and steady, almost free. Letting silence take its place, like something moving through you gently. You kept your meaning close and low, just enough for me to know. I watched the way the silence moves between the things we tried to say. How every pause revealed the truth, how every breath fell into place. You lingered like a shifting line I couldn't name but still could trace. And I kept feeling you define the way the silence moves in space. Said you meant this way. Ooh, but meaning always finds its way. You kept your thoughts in subtle lines, soft suggestions, nothing sharp. I read the tremble in your signs, the way you softened every part. You spoke like you were half in view, letting quiet take the view. And I kept leaning into you, finding something underneath. You kept your meaning close and low, just enough for me to know. I watched the way the silence moved inside the spaces we create. How everything we don't refuse becomes a thing we hesitate. You shifted like a careful breath, some truth you didn't want to lose. And I kept learning how to sense the way your silence threads a fuse. Quiet was your chosen tone, you played it like a steady guide. If closeness meant you'd stand alone, I felt the echo you denied. And all the questions you restrained still held the shape of what we'd been. A pattern we had never named, a truth that moved beneath your skin. The quiet never breaks too loud. It's in the way you shift your mouth. I watch the way the silence moves until it nearly pulled you through. A soft confession